So March can be fickle weather-wise. For example, I'm here to tell you all about visiting Washington, D.C. during cherry blossoms, which can bloom anytime a few weeks from now, and yet it snowed here yesterday. Now, my biggest piece of advice for planning your trip to Washington, D.C. around the cherry blossoms is to don't do that. It's really hard to plan your trip around a tree. Cherry blossom trees are meant to be impermanent. They only bloom for a short period of time, and they decide when they're going to bloom. They don't listen to the National Park Service horticulturalists, the meteorologists, or watch our videos to see when they should bloom. But we do keep an eye on all of those things and share out the Bloom Watch on our social media, which is at Top Things to Do DC on Twitter and Instagram, and DC by Foot on Facebook. So unless you're very flexible and can travel to Washington, D.C. at a moment's notice, it might be difficult to plan a trip in advance around the peak blooms. But that's okay, there's still so much to do in Washington, D.C. during the cherry blossom season. And we're here to help you figure out what else you can do or how you can see the cherry blossoms if you arrive just a little bit too early, just a little bit too late, or you can't handle the crowds.
Peak cherry blossom bloom is historically the first week of April, but sometimes it can be early or late depending on the weather. Cherry blossoms are fickle creatures. They are greatly affected by the weather for both when they bloom and how long, and there's no way to tell for sure in advance. Figure out when you can come visit DC regardless of when the blooms will be at their peak. You can base it on some of the great events that happen as part of the 4 weeks long Cherry Blossom Festival or special events that are happening this March and April. Even if you miss a few days of peak bloom, you're going to find a beautiful city full of flowers, blooming trees, and spring celebrations. If you ended up in DC too early to see the cherry blossoms, try the indicator tree. There is one tree by the Thomas Jefferson Memorial that always blooms a week before the rest. If you got to DC too early, go check out this tree. At least you can see one cherry blossom before you go. If you missed the chance to see the cherry blossoms that peak and are too late, try the Kwanzaa blossoms on Haines Point. They historically bloom about 2 weeks after the main blossoms on the tidal basin, but are just as pretty. If you are here for peak bloom, but there are just too many people, go at sunrise. It's a quieter and potentially more beautiful time to view the blossoms. You'll see plenty of photographers, but you'll get there before most of the crowds. Now, if you're here for peak blooms, you're likely wondering how to get the best photos. In the age of Instagram selfies, you'll be hard-pressed to get a photo that does not also include 100 of your new closest friends. Let's be honest, it gets crowded. Though the most photographed spots are along the tidal basin, these are not the only places. Use our guide to find some of the best places and best times to view the cherry blossoms. If you want to avoid the crowds, we have some suggestions. Go a little further. Just past the tidal basin, you can find some of the oldest trees along Haines Point. Or get in the water. You can rent a paddle boat to take out on the basin to get a different perspective and a bit of fun. Just be careful with your camera. You can also find cherry blossoms in other parts of the town, like Arlington National Cemetery, Georgetown, and Capitol Hill. We offer tours of all these areas and special Blossoms on the Basin tours during peak bloom. Let our guide lead you to the best spot for photos and weave through the crowds to tell you the history of the trees and the celebration of spring and our friendship with Japan.
We have so much more information on our blog post linked in the description below. If you have any questions or comments, let us know in the comment section below, and we look forward to seeing you during the cherry blossoms, peak bloom or not, this spring.